And everybody always told me BioShock 1 was going to create controversy because of the little sisters. It never really happened, you know. And I think the reason that is because we handled the matter. It was there to tell a story. You know, the harvesting of the little sisters was there to tell a story. And I think we handled it appropriately. And I can't say it's going to be across the board 100%, but my expectation is that a reasonable person playing BioShock Infinite will realize it doesn't have a bone to pick with any, like, you know, people say to me, well, you're saying negative things about America. I'm saying, well, this isn't America. It's Colombia. They split off from America for a reason because they felt America wasn't American enough for them. You know, they rejected America. And B, I don't think there's anything wrong with having, you know, things that make you question your judgment, and you know, and I think that I love one of the reasons I think The Walking Dead has been so popular is because the characters keep getting in situations where they end up doing things they would have found abhorrent before, but they do it because of you know, they don't really, well, they have a choice, but they make a choice, and they have to live with the consequences of that choice. And it's complex in that way that, you know, there's not a right answer. And I'm comfortable, in my head with knowing, for instance, George Washington was both a great man and a revolutionary figure. I don't mean that in the war sense. I mean in the sort of, you know, history sense, and a slave owner at the same time. I'm comfortable understanding that there are multiple aspects of him, and I think that if you're not, and you want a more simplistic view of the universe, you're missing out on something. This is a story that sort of gets reported on very strangely. What actually happened was, and he saw a scene in the game and he found it. You know, he was a religious fellow. He's a religious fellow, and he found the scene offensive to him, as, you know, based upon his religion. And so he was going to quit. And I sat down. Well, you know, before you go, let's just sit down and have a chat. And we just talked about it, and we ended up talking for a couple of hours. And we started with understanding what upset him, and then we just started talking about religion in general. And I had been struggling with the script because I'm not a religious person, and I was trying to write these characters who were very religious, and that's always a tough place for a writer to be. And in the conversation, I found an opportunity to expand the believability of these characters and the reality of these characters. Like, why would people follow this guy, Comstock? What is it about him that people want to follow? And for me, I can't just sort of say, you know, religious ecstasy, because I never felt that. And so I want to write something I could connect to. And so I said to him, look, I'm going to go write something that I think is going to make the story better. You may still hate it and you may still want to quit, but that's your call. But I think I have an opportunity to make the game better here. And that's the thing, is if you make a change for every single person, if you make a change to please people, every person on the team, you're never going to stop doing that. If you make a change to improve the quality of the game, that's always a good thing. I mean, for me, I'm not sensitive to having any of my beliefs challenged, because either I'm going to believe, you know, if one of two things will happen. One is the person won't make a convincing argument and my beliefs won't change. Or two is they'll make a very convincing argument and I'll probably end up in a place that I have more wisdom. I think there's, but I'm not a person of faith, so I don't fully understand why people are so sensitive to that. There's this notion of, like, you can't even be near that because it will damage you. And my sense is that, that faith untested is not necessary. It's not as strong a faith. And I think that there's a reason why God put Job, through all those trials. If you want to get old school on it, and I think that I don't know, but there's definitely a sensitivity. I think whenever people's belief systems are challenged by something, quite often they can get very sensitive about it and very nervous about it. And I like being around actually people who think differently than I do. Like I love that conversation with that member of the team because he had a totally different worldview than I did, in terms of a lot of things, and I found it fascinating. I think he saw that the thing I was doing was going to make a better game, and I think it showed him that. Well, I mean, I'm not him. I can't speak for him. I think he got excited about the potential for the character in terms of it being a richer character. And I think he probably felt it was a bit of a shallow character before because I didn't have a perspective of a person who had faith. And I just saw an opportunity outside of any scripture. It was just I just kept saying to myself, why would people follow this guy? Why would people follow this guy? And the conversation is what yielded the answer. Right now, I'm heavily involved in the second and third DLCs and plotting and storyline and things like that. I'm not really involved in the first one. Yeah, basically, what it's the same as anything. You sort of come up with the plot, you come with the concept, you come with the plot, and you work with the level builders to sort of populate that, and then eventually you go back and you actually sit down and write the words. But unfortunately, now I have a team of people who worked with me on BioShock Infinite, like Drew Holmes and Joel Fielder, and who are other writers who can sort of help, get some of the writing done because the writing can be extensive. I'd have to know more about it. I'd have to do some research. I mean, obviously, my background in Old and New Testament was more, even though I'm not a religious person, I had a reasonable understanding of the Old and New Testament, and where I'm more shaky ground once you start talking about a Shiite versus the beliefs of a Shiite versus the beliefs of a Sunni, and the kind of conflicts that form in that society. So I don't know. I usually come at it from like what's a good story, and then how do I populate that story with things that are meaningful to that story. The subjects in Infinite and BioShock 1 came very very late. Like some optometrist or some dentist will write to me and say, I have an idea for a game. I am willing to share this idea with you if we split the profit, and your team can develop it if we split the profits. And I'm like, thanks, that's terrific. And the reason that's so weird is ideas are not really the hard part. It's executing on the ideas, developing the ideas. Like I could have said, oh yeah, you got this girl, Elizabeth, and she walks along with you. And she's like your buddy, and she helps you out. Go make that. But that's not what it's about. It's about it's about being there every day, and it's about making all those decisions and making all those compromises sometimes. And in terms of we can't do that because we're out of memory or whatever. What can we do? And then coming up with maybe a better idea coming out of that compromise. See the headline: Levine says compromises were made in BioShock Infinite. So I don't think ideas on their own have a lot of value. I think it's can a person execute on them? More memory, more power is always a good thing. That's obviously to start with. I'm excited about what they're doing with being able to play games indirectly, like over a Vita, being able to play PS4 games. That the notion that a piece of powerful hardware becomes essentially a server for. I mean, it's not literally working like a server. I understand that, but essentially a server, because I think that's really important. Netflix. What's great about it is you're watching on your TV, and then you pause the movie and you go to lie in bed and you watch on another TV, and then you're on the train and you take out your iPad or iPhone and you continue to watch the same movie. That transferability of the experience, I think, is really powerful, and it's something that's really standing in our way. So I like to see that happen. I'm all for that kind of transferability. More memory means, for instance, you could put more objects in the world. And the question is, how much do you need to be successful? And I don't think there are a lot of concerns that we weren't able to do what we want to do on Infinite. I think it really is one of those games that, you look at the end of the cycle and you're like, wow, they really sort of squeezed every drop out of that thing. But, to do a next gen game would, we would have had to start this game several years later, and you wouldn't be seeing it, for I don't know how many years. And I think that we really intended to be a sort of one of those final expressions of this generation of this is what the console can do. It'll be a very different experience because two people working together, they're cooperating, and they both have the agenda of finishing the game. Where Elizabeth's agenda is Elizabeth's agenda, and she has her own character, her own personality, and there's a way that she can develop. When you have a writer and an actor and specific animations, there's ways she can develop as a character that in a co-op experience. No matter what, it's rare. You go through you're playing Left 4 Dead, which is a great game, with a friend, and they go through major emotional changes. Where Elizabeth is constantly evolving, on that front, and Booker's relationship with her is evolving. So it would be a very different experience.
Avant Arkham Asylum, donc c'est-à-dire avant le premier jeu de la série. C'est la veille de Noël, donc le soir du réveillon. Les gens sont chez eux en train de faire leur fête en famille. Et le Black Mask, qui est un des méchants de l'univers de Batman. Non, c'est pas le plus connu. En fait, il réunit un groupe de 8 assassins, avec un T, assassin. Et